Hello and welcome to this Utility Week webinar in association with Copperleaf, Accelerating Investment Planning Excellence, Affinity Water Story. I'm Liz Berry, contributing editor at Utility Week, and I'm delighted to welcome so many on the call with us today. We're lucky to have a great opportunity this morning to hear firsthand from Sarah Sayer, Investment Planning Manager at Affinity Water, and Cicely Striolo, Solutions Consultant at Copperleaf, about their recent project to build and implement the Copperleaf portfolio solution at the water company. I'm sure all the people listening on this call will appreciate the level of complexity involved in asset management and investment planning at UK utilities in 2021. And today we have an opportunity to really unpack how making the decision to implement this particular solution and then stepping through the process of actually implementing the solution has contributed to transforming asset management and investment planning at the water company. For those listening, there is a chat function and a Q&A box on your screens. We want to present this story as a conversation between Affinity Water as client and Copperleaf as solution provider. And Sarah and Cicely have been collaborating on this implementation over the past 4 months. So the robust rapport that they've developed during that time will, I think, provide us with a great basis for our discussion this morning. And I want for you all to get your questions answered about the Copperleaf Decision Analytics Solution suite of products, as well as Affinity Water's experience with the Copperleaf portfolio module. So therefore, please do ask your questions in the Q&A box as the conversation unfolds. Thank you. And may I just say, Sarah, we can't see your video. So if you could switch that on, that would be great. And with that, I'm delighted to introduce Cicely Striolo, Solutions Consultant at Copperleaf.
Hello, everyone. I am Cicely Striolo, and I am the Solutions Consultant and Senior Consultant for the implementation at Affinity Water this year. Sarah, I see you now, so I hope everyone else can as well. Great.
So hi everyone, good morning. I'm Sarah. I work for Affinity Water, and I've been really delighted to work with Cicely over the last few months on our implementation of Copperleaf portfolio. I'm really pleased to talk to you today about our story. So Cicely, you're going to take us a little bit through about the company next.
Absolutely. So a little bit about Copperleaf. So I've been with the company for a little bit less than a year now, and I really enjoy working with the team that we have in EMEA and working with great clients like Sarah and Affinity Water. And I think that's really at the core of what I wanted to say about who Copperleaf is. While we focus on providing a solution for asset management and portfolio management software for our clients in energy and utility sectors, what really I think makes it a good company to work for, a great company to work for, is about the community. I hope it comes across today in our webinar and our conversation that when we start working with our clients, we partner with them from beginning of the implementation all the way to the very end, post go live, so that we continue to listen to their needs and really bring them into the solution and planning for future features and elements that we design into our solution. So it's really just a great software company to work for and really making a difference in helping our clients value their decisions and really drive to bringing the best value for money for their customers through the asset planning and portfolio management features that we have. And now, Sarah, I'd like to pass it over to you so you can discuss a little bit about Affinity.
Thanks, Cicely. So welcome everyone to Affinity Water's little tiny patch. We serve around about 3.5 million customers, mostly around the home counties, but you can see we've also got a couple of small patches over in Essex, but also down in Folkestone and Dover. We're sandwiched between a couple of absolute titans of the industry, Anglian Water to the north and Thames Water to the south. We supply water only, so we don't do the water recycling part. So we have, thanks to our Thames, Anglian and Southern colleagues for that service. But we put around about 950 million litres of water a day into supply. We've got some particularly interesting features. So we serve 3 international airports, Heathrow, Stansted and Luton. We have some really interesting characteristics. So around about 10% of the world's globally rare chalk streams are in our area through the Chiltern Hills. So there's some really interesting and exciting demographics around Affinity that make us a little bit unique. We're small, but we think we're pretty important, and we just want to be able to do better to serve our customers all the time. So in terms of the role that I provide to Affinity, I look after our investment planning, our capital investment planning. So for me, that's all about making sure that we spend our customers' money wisely. For those who may not know a great deal about the difference between capital investment and operational, CapEx is a bit like a mortgage and a bit like deciding to do an extension on the back of your house. So it's something that you have to plan for. It's something that you need to look after. It's something that you might want to change in the future if your circumstances change. Whereas OPEX is more like paying your water bills, more like putting food into your fridge. So in terms of what we do here, we want to make sure that we not just spend our customers' money wisely, but we do the right things. Water companies have performance commitments, targets that they agreed with our regulator Ofwat that we have to meet in the interests of our customers, our stakeholders, and the local environment. So for us, it's a really important balance to strike between exactly what we spend our customers' money on and the performance that we require to deliver. And things change all of the time. So the reason that we reached out to the market and made the decision to go with Copperleaf, Cicely, would you mind flicking on to the next slide? Thank you. So in terms of what we do at Affinity, in terms of the plan that we create, the CapEx plan to spend, there's a huge reliance on Excel. I'm sure I'm not unique in the water company industry to say that we have a huge reliance on those spreadsheets. For us in the company, everything appears equal. So whether we're spending money on leakage, we're spending money to improve the local environment, whether we're helping our customers with their water consumption, it's all important, all of it. It's also quite difficult to see for us when a risk emerges, when there's a need for us to do something, the relationship between what it is that we need to address and the potential solutions, and the way in which we compare those different types of investments when things do change. It's difficult for us to be able to perform scenarios. So we have lots of other tools and systems that help us, but nothing that has oversight of the entire portfolio. And I don't wish to come across as arrogant in any way, but relying on spreadsheets and what's inside people's heads is not a particularly resilient way for a company to run its business. So we recognise that. We have amazing people. I probably should have mentioned, I've only been with the company only 14 or so years. It's nothing compared to some of the amazing people that I work with and their length of service. But we rely a huge amount on that corporate knowledge to be able to build our asset plans. We have our water resources management plan. We have a very detailed approach to the way that we build up our capital maintenance planning. We also understand where we need to make some really big investments, like the extension on the back of the house I mentioned. It's underpinned by huge amounts of data, huge amounts of analysis, and obviously a really detailed understanding of what we spend our money on. But effectively, we leap over to the right-hand side and say, this is what we're going to be spending our money on, and that goes into our business plan that we then get scrutinised by Ofwat, and we work together to make sure that we have the right amount of money, but not too much, to be able to deliver those performance commitments and those expectations of our customers. And it's the bit that's in the middle of that slide there that for me has been missing for our company for quite a while. So what we went out to the market to look for was something that could address a number of those challenges that I mentioned, something that could bring everything together, our list of emerging risks, not just things that we intend to spend the money on, but the things that we might need to spend money on to be able to manage and mitigate the greatest risks to the company. I wanted to be able to do something that allowed us to compare a common currency of risk, so that if things did change, we understood what the implications of those changes were. So swapping one project for another, what would that do to the intended performance within the company? And so for us, the right answer was Copperleaf and Copperleaf Portfolio. So I think, Cicely, it's over to you now to talk us a little bit through what Copperleaf, the suite is, and then what we do in the middle and what Copperleaf Portfolio can do for Affinity Water.
So thank you, Sarah. I always enjoy hearing the way you describe the challenges that you are facing, and I think that it's really great the kind of scenario that you described, because that's exactly the scenario that we'd love to help solve at Copperleaf. So the way we've designed the software is really modular. So while we do have a Copperleaf suite that can communicate completely from asset through to portfolio and start doing the performance management that can bring your delivery system data back into the system so that you have continuous planning. Based on what Sarah has described, what we decided was the right approach here was to look at just the Copperleaf portfolio module. So like I said, while it can easily communicate with asset strategies and asset data and the delivery system, we can also make it stand on its own. And that's exactly what we've done here. So what we have is that with the asset management system that Affinity Water has, they've taken the outputs from that and they're creating those outputs as the needs that they can enter into the Copperleaf portfolio system as what you'd see on this slide here is other investments. So even though it is actually coming from asset data and their asset management system, it's being entered into Copperleaf portfolio as investments. And those projects, those investments that we'll see in the next couple of slides, an example investment, those feed into portfolios and programs that Affinity Water has defined. And that is going to help them build their business case on an ongoing basis so that in the end, they'll be able to look at taking snapshots of their business case when they're looking at submitting for their regulatory periods. So absolutely what Copperleaf Portfolio does is help to build that business case, make it standard, give a template, provide a common way to communicate across the company to build those investment needs and then build those into the business case development, which ultimately gets put to the portfolio level so that they can do the optimization that Sarah was looking for. They have that common way to communicate as she has said in the past, the way to look at apples, oranges, and giraffes and understand which one of those investments actually has the greatest ability to deliver value. And all of this is really underpinned by Copperleaf value and the value framework. And we'll talk a bit about that, a bit more about that later, and how we've designed it for the water market. But I think it's really important. The greatest value that I anticipate Affinity being able to benefit from adopting Copperleaf portfolio is the ability, like I said, to do that portfolio optimization, to have that record of the approved plan, and to have the capability of running that scenario analysis, all driven by that value framework that allows the comparison of those apples, oranges, and giraffes, and the ability to, with time, grow with them so that they can take those actuals and reforecast from their already defined delivery system and bring those back into the portfolio so that you go from having a batch system of portfolio management to something that's more continuous, so that it becomes a lot easier to have that continuous cycle of management of the portfolio and the business plan. So I promised you that we would talk a little bit more detail about how that looks. And what we have here is an example business plan or investment, or sorry, business case of an investment that was built in Copperleaf portfolio. So what you see here on the slide is an example of an investment summary. In the top left-hand corner, you have the details of how the business case was developed. So you can see who owns the business case. You can see which stage it is in their approval management of their investments. And you can see that this, at the moment, has one original recommended alternative. They can continue to build this business case out and put additional alternatives into the system that allows the value framework, when it does its optimization, to choose between which will give the best value for money, not just for this one single investment, but across the entire portfolio. So it may very well be that one investment alternative actually has a higher value than another, but because of the trade-offs, it actually makes sense within the portfolio to allow there to be more room in the portfolio to do another alternative on a different investment that is ultimately going to increase the overall portfolio value. But on an investment by investment case, you have here in the summary tile the information that you need, an investment owner would need to be able to understand which is the best investment alternative to begin suggesting and putting forward within the business. So you have, like I said, the business case that the investment owner developed in the top left-hand corner quadrant. In the top right-hand corner quadrant, you can see the annual forecast of that investment. So you can see that it's got a estimated spend of £50,000 across 3 fiscal years. And you can also see the baseline risk by type within the portfolio. So in this situation, you've got cost, private cost is the actual risk scenario that is being addressed here. But then you can see that after they've completed the forecasted spend, that you've addressed whatever the baseline risk was, and you go back down to a much lower risk scenario. So starting to be able to see how this investment is helping Sarah and Affinity Water manage that risk profile that she was hoping to be able to do by adopting the software. And then last but not least, in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see the investment value pane, and that shows how the investment is being valued by the value function. The value function is definable and adjustable by Affinity Water. So at the moment, we're looking at one that's defined by aligned to their private cost value function. So you can see that the value measures that have been assigned to this investment show the private cost is in the positive region, and then the overall net investment cost, which is basically the net present value of the forecasted spend, is showing in the pane. And so you can see the total value that this proposed project is actually bringing with this current recommended alternative to the overall portfolio.
And I guess I would add into that, Cicely, that this is ticking a number of boxes for me. So before we might have had one of our many Excel spreadsheets to describe exactly what you've got here, but this is all in one system. All of the alternatives are valued. So it's not just a case of only looking at the preferred solution. So being able to describe the risk, the need that we have for investment, and the multiple different ways of being able to address that risk, but also being able to see whether or not alternatives, different candidates for investment, are able to address the risk in totality, or whether there is a degree of residual risk. So that's also something that's really important for us, because we might have investments whereby there are solutions that are half the cost of the preferred solution, but address 80% of the risk. And that starts a different kind of conversation within the company about its level of risk tolerance. So that's incredibly useful for me to be able to have all of that in one place, and to be able to quickly search for investments. I haven't got to rely on my incredible colleagues back at branch and what they know and where they might find their spreadsheets that are squirreled away. So being able to have this, being able to have something that's searchable, all of it in one place, all of it valued in that common currency, that's exactly what I was looking for.
Thank you, Sarah. So the next thing I wanted to show was how that rolls into the portfolio hierarchy. Excuse me. So that investment that we just saw would be assigned to a portfolio. Now, the way we've configured the portfolio hierarchy for Affinity Water is that they have the Affinity Water umbrella, and then underneath the Affinity Water umbrella, they have their defined programs for their AMP period. And each one of the investments that we define in the system is going to be allocated to its appropriate portfolio. Now, within their portfolio, they have their standard planning portfolio, which is their official record that they will be using for the actual regulatory submissions. But they also have something that we call the ad hoc portfolio. And the ad hoc portfolio allows Sarah and Alan and the rest of her colleagues to be able to play around in a kind of sandbox environment. So they can do things like create a scenario of what does it look like if we actually didn't constrain our CapEx spend to the level that we've been asked to in the business plan. what if we had 5% more? What would that look like? What additional investments would we be able to fly into the AMP period? And so they can do things like that. They can look at what would happen if they wanted to restrict it further, or if they wanted to actually put constraints on resources. So that's one of the benefits of having that ad hoc portfolio option, is that they can do those kind of scenario optimization planning functions that we described a few slides earlier. But they can do it in a way that isn't going to cause havoc in the official record. And if they do find a solution that they do want to convert to an official record, they have that ability to do that as well. So I think one of the things to kind of talk through in this slide is, again, you've got the quadrants. This time it's not quite 4, but 3. But what you see here is in the top left-hand corner is actually the portfolio hierarchy. So you can see exactly how the portfolios are arranged. In the top right-hand side, what you see are all the investments that are actually defined within that portfolio folder. And on the bottom, you can see a combination of which investments are in which stage of their planning cycle. And also, this one is showing a CapEx view. So you can see the forecasted spend, CapEx spend, based on the investments defined within the portfolio. Let's see. There was a question I see in the chat, sorry, that I'm not supposed to be looking at, about does the investment need to have a business case developed to get into the portfolio? There is a baseline element that does need to be defined. And it's a few fields that are appropriate for Affinity Water as the very least that needs to be defined to be able to press save so that investment can get to the investment summary page. But we can talk a bit more about that later. So the last thing I wanted to say about their solution is talk a little bit about that value framework, because this is what's ultimately giving Sarah that ability to do the comparison across all of her investments. So what we've defined for the water market is a value framework that is aligned to the 6 capitals. And this is really key because I think everyone kind of recognizes the importance of water, right, in daily life, of all the elements that we interact with in our utilities every day. Water is so essential, right? And we just really wanted to make sure that they had the ability to align their performance commitments to being able to help them manage the levers that are going to impact their ability to be good stewards within their community and give value back to not just their customers, but to their stakeholders, both people and environmental. So kind of what's the social, environmental, and governance, SEG, is that right? The new phrase that we're rolling out that everyone likes to use. But giving them those first steps, those first bricks to build into their plan that would allow them to think about not just the importance of managing that CapEx, but managing how their investments are going to deliver value across the 6 capitals. And looking a little bit more about what does that mean? How does that work? So we've defined a little bit of detail here to just give you a quick overview of their value models that align to their value framework. And you can see that they've got a number of models that align to common performance commitments that are defined by Ofwat, but they've been allocated to their respective 6 capital. So for example, CMEX customer experience, we've aligned to social capital. Obviously, things like CapEx, OpEx, and the TOTEX would align to financial capital. But you've got things like mains repair that align to manufacturing capital. So that when they define their value function, which is what the optimizer is, the objective function that the optimizer is optimizing to give that greatest value definition of when to execute projects, the most optimum time to deliver the optimum value, and to choose the optimum alternatives to deliver, again, that optimum value across the portfolio. It's aligned to optimizing these 6 elements. So, yep, Sarah.
Well, I was just going to jump in to say, for anyone who's eyeballing those models very, very closely, so we have 21 value models within our value framework. Some of them you'll see that appear in more than one capital, so water quality compliance, for example, the CRI appears in more than one, as do a few of the others. I would say I'm a difficult client. I'm sure challenging is probably a more appropriate term for me. But I also wanted additional models that weren't in the common UK water value framework that is provided by Copperleaf. So it's been really great to be able to challenge Cicely and the team, and I'm very grateful for their response to be able to build us additional value models to configure them exactly as we need. So although we have common performance commitments, they are measured in a particular way, so being able to make sure that they reflect the way that we measure our performance, so that we can assign the relevant value models to all of the investments. So we don't apply all of them to every single investment. If you have, for example, an environmental benefit that we're looking at, for example, river restoration, that will have a different set of value measures to, for example, a leakage project, and they won't always be the same. So the great thing about the value framework is that you assign the relevant value models to the investments that you're looking at to be able to evaluate them. And because they're in a common currency, I'm able to compare apples, oranges and giraffes, as Cicely has said. We can also fully configure it. So if, for example, we wish to run a scenario where we applied a greater weighting to a different value model, so if we wanted to understand how the portfolio might change if we wanted to enhance the environmental benefit, for example, we would give that simply a greater weighting than all of the other value models. We would then run that scenario and see how things change in that sandbox, as Cicely has mentioned. So it's really exciting for me to be able to have a play around with our entire investment portfolio, to be able to look at all of the emerging risks, capture all of them, and understand what the level of residual risk is. So I'm really excited with what the value framework is doing for us within the company at the moment.
Thank you, Sarah. I think that's actually the perfect segue to the next thing that we want to talk about, which is the expected benefits. So I think it's worth saying that we've gone live as of the 30th of April. So this is hot off the press. It's very fresh. So I'll pass it back to Sarah, and she can begin to enumerate a bit more exactly what she's hoping to see for as a result of implementing Copperleaf portfolio.
Thanks, Cicely. So as Cicely mentioned, we're, I think, about 4 months and 2 days after we initially started implementation. So it's been really swift. Cicely and I have never met each other in person, so everything's been done virtually online. So I think I've mentioned some of the benefits already as we've been speaking. So for me, it's really exciting to have everything in one place. I'm a little bit of a control freak, so to be able to see all of the risks, all of the needs, all of the potential opportunities in one place, searchable, to be able to have all of the potential solutions linked to those risks and needs in the same place as well, and to understand the relative value of them, incredibly important to us as a company. We've talked a little bit already about the value framework. I've had another go at doing that myself about 2 years ago on another Excel spreadsheet. So it's really, really exciting for me to have something that has been tried and tested. And we haven't mentioned that our colleagues to the north in Anglian, they've got Copperleaf as well, which is super exciting. So we are the second adopter within the water industry for the UK. But they've obviously been working very closely with Copperleaf for quite some time on the value framework. So ours is a little bit different, but it has definitely common roots. So it's really exciting for us to be able to get that and to have that working for us. I haven't really mentioned another little phrase that we like to use in Affinity around the trade-off between cost, risk and performance. We have a certain amount of money available to us this period. We can only spend up to that amount. Risks are changing all the time. When we submitted our business plan to Ofwat a couple of years ago, we hadn't expected that there would be a global pandemic, which has obviously caused a little bit of change for many of us. So to be able to see and forecast the potential for change and to understand what the implications of that might be on the portfolio, really, really important. For me, I guess it's what I do with the company, but making investment planning part of our business as usual everyday activities is really, really important for me. So I'm sure that for a lot of companies, there's a huge amount of effort required. to be able to prepare their business plan on something that we do once every 5 years for the water sector. But for me, it's all the time. So whether it's, I don't particularly want to be fiddling about with my spreadsheet every day, but it is something that happens all the time. So to have a system that is audited, that is, we track the change, trace the change, Cicely can show me exactly who's been meddling around. That's really, really exciting for us to be able to track and manage that change. And I fundamentally believe that Copperleaf portfolio is setting us up for success for PR24. That's what I'm expecting to happen, Cicely. So we're going to deliver on that.
No pressure, no pressure. It's going to be fine. No, I think it's great. I mean, I absolutely agree with everything you said, Sarah. And I've really been enjoying working with you and understanding your use cases and doing demos within your environment with my team, and defining kind of those, like I said, those use cases that you'll be regularly depending on, and demonstrating that the system can do those things for you, and will give you the kind of functionality like milestone dependency, so that you can understand what the impact will be when you have that requirement that you must do this before you can do another investment, and seeing how that's going to kind of create that interlinking within your portfolio, so that you understand how everything's connected, and have some confidence that when you do that optimization, it's taking those details into account. And inevitably the door rings.
Well, that's a good cue for me to step in and say thank you very much for your all the information and what you've given us so far. I think it's probably testament to the sort of value of these open conversations and knowledge sharing, that we've had so many fantastic questions coming in while you've been speaking. So I'm going to start throwing those at you right now.
So, Liz, before
Yeah.
you do that, is it all right? I know that we're close to time. We can absolutely start filling in those questions. I didn't know if we wanted to talk a little bit about the experience. We did have that one final slide.
Go for it.
Okay, sorry about that.
I guess for me, I think Cicely, I'm planning to click on. So as we've mentioned, we're just 4 months into our journey. So we went live just 2 weeks ago. But for me, what I've been really impressed by within Copperleaf, and Cicely in particular, as well as James and Demetrius and others within the team, it's been hard sometimes to see where Affinity stops and Copperleaf starts, which has been really, I think, the success around our implementation. You wouldn't know. The lines are really, really blurred between us, and being able to reach out to each other, ask questions. As I mentioned, I'm a particularly challenging client, and to be able to get answers to my questions and things that I need and things that I want. I was also warned that there might be challenges around the implementation, IT, but I can't say that for our company. Our IT have been absolutely fantastic and along the journey, and I guess it's just that level of engagement that we have, being a little bit smaller, I guess, than some of the bigger guys within the water sector, being able to get to the right people and being able to solve solutions, a real can-do attitude. So it's been an absolute pleasure so far, and we're really looking forward to being one of the best clients Copperleaf has got.
Sarah, you're well on that road. I think that's the one thing I want to say is, you know, Sarah likes to give us credit for having a really enjoyable implementation, but I don't think we could have had the implementation we've had without Sarah. She thinks that she says that she's a challenging client, but I don't find that true to be that. I don't find that to be true at all. What I find is that Sarah has, through her years of project management experience, she really understands the importance of having a definition. It's really, really difficult to understand where your destination is when the finish line keeps moving, or when it's kind of really unambiguous about, or it's, I'm sorry, not unambiguous, but ambiguous about what the benefits are we're trying to deliver. But I think we just really had a nice alignment between what Sarah's needs were and her understanding of her her company and her needs for the system. So it's made it extremely easy actually to configure. And you're absolutely right. Your IT team has been really responsive. I know from just general years of project management experience, as a project manager, one of the most challenging things that you can deal with is a client that doesn't pick up the phone or doesn't respond to emails. And I mean, I wouldn't be exaggerating if I said that we get emails back in 30 seconds, 5 minutes. I asked Sarah to do something so I could put valuations in the system. She had it wrapped up in 20 minutes. I mean, they were just as dedicated to getting this implementation completed as we were. And that is priceless, absolutely priceless. So thank you, Sarah.
Fantastic.
And thank you, Alan.
Thank you. Thank you. I know it was certainly a fast moving project. So I'm going to move on to some of these questions. We've got questions coming in on the Q&A panel and also in the chat panel. So I'll run through the ones on the Q&A first, and then, you guys might want to pick up on some on the public chat as well. So the first is for Sarah. It looks like a great step forward. How have you integrated this approach with your risk and value process in terms of coming up with alternatives and collaboratively choosing a best value intervention option?
Hello, John. Nice to see you on the conference. It's quite a quick and easy answer, really. So when we load investments into the system, risk and value is part of that. So we use risk and value to help us come up with the solutions. We might have a number of other solutions that might have been pre-risk and value, and we use them as part of that optimization. I'm sure that you'll agree with me that risk and value is absolutely exceptional at project level, but at portfolio level, there might be a better value solution. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to bring both risk and value and Copperleaf portfolio together, because there may be scenarios or situations in which there is a better value alternative that risk and value didn't select, because there might be a relationship with other projects in other parts of the portfolio. So they absolutely are intertwined.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Another one for you, coming straight back at you. How do you make TOTEX decisions, i.e. the trade-off of OPEX and CAPEX to address risk performance?
That's also part of it. So hello, Kyle, nice to see you on the call. For this one, we didn't probably mention, Cicely, that Copperleaf portfolio is a whole life cost solution provider. So we include both CAPEX and OPEX as part of a TOTEX solution. So we don't just have to think about CAPEX solutions. So while I'm talking about the capital programme for Affinity Water, there might be options that are in there that are OPEX cost solutions. So we do account for that as well as part of the solution. This all comes down to the ability to trade off on the risk, and looking at whole life costs. There may well be a scenario where there is a solution that is entirely OPEX that is better value than a CAPEX solution, and that's all part of it. That's all included.
Fantastic, thank you. Cicely, one that I think would probably be good for you to address. So how do you ensure the quality of data coming into the system, and does Copperleaf help to manage this?
So I think this one's from Sean. Hi, Sean. Right, so yes, there's always the data challenge. And I think one of the things that we really like to say at Copperleaf is that data will come in, but at the moment, Affinity and all of our clients, before they ever adopted Copperleaf, they were making decisions based on the data that they had. One of the things that we've seen with our clients is that once you define the system and you define what your needs are, you start to understand which data is most important to you in that system to feed the system and to keep it going. So I think that's one of the things that Sarah, you may step in and comment on eventually, is that once we started doing the valuations, once we started seeing the data that Affinity had, I mean, we can put in the straightforward capital forecast and OPEX forecast that Affinity already had. But now we're starting to see the importance of getting things like embodied carbon or operational carbon valued. And so one of the things that, like I said, the system has done is start to reveal and start those conversations within Affinity about the different kinds of data that is needed to help get that full picture of the value of each investment, not just the cost. And then how do we manage that? I think as far as actually getting that data into the system, one of the elements, well, there are a couple of approaches that we can take. One of them would be integrations. That's not one of the things that we've done with this particular implementation, but what we do have in as an alternative to automated integrations is to actually provide Sarah and her team with ETL loaders. And that's what I've been using to load data into the system on their behalf. And so when we define that ETL loader, it's just, it does on its face look a bit like another spreadsheet, but it really makes it easy to get the data in the right format and in a format that's easy to quickly populate and then enter into the system within a click of a button. So it's pretty painless once you know exactly what data you're looking for, and have that format to be able to enter it into the system.
Fantastic, thank you, Cicely. There's a couple of questions coming in, Sarah, about the length of time that it took to do the implementation. I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit on that for us and just kind of give us a bit more information about, you know, when did it start, when did it end, how did it run through the process?
Yeah, of course. So a very ambitious timetable. I think it was in total around about 14 weeks that we took to implement it, so just shy of 4 months. We signed contracts with Copperleaf just before Christmas. And there was a huge amount of work, largely on Cicely's end, to understand us, which was, I imagine, probably quite a complex task for you, Cicely, to understand us, our systems, and how everything works. So there was quite a lot of, again, use of technology, some incredible whiteboarding sessions to understand process mapping that we did. And that took a lot of the first sort of few weeks. For us, Alan and I were particularly keen to get hold of the system, to have it ready to play with and ready to go. Cicely had to keep us on a tight rein to make sure that we didn't run before we could walk, because there was a huge amount of configuration that needed to be done. So as I say, working through things like the value framework and the operations, so all of the syntax that sits behind the way that the value models operate, having to test those. We're still doing a few little bits and pieces of snagging at the moment, but everything is working as we expected. I confess that one of the things that was worrying me was about feeding the beast. So as Cicely has mentioned around things like data quality, so it isn't just a matter of just bunging a number into a spreadsheet and asking Cicely to upload that into the system, wanting to make sure that we understood where that data came from. The system's also really helpful in the sense that it identifies if something is missing. So if you say you want to value something, but you haven't entered something within the value function, it can also identify a bunch of that. So it's taken us, the first few weeks were very enjoyable for me and Alan, because it was an awful lot about sharing everything with Cicely. But since then, it's been a couple of months of hard slog to make sure that we understand what we're doing, what the data is doing, and that the system is performing exactly as we would expect it to. But just shy of 4 months.
Yeah, great, thank you. It's a really impressive kind of timeline, I think. Okay, great. There's one here for Cicely, I think. Is there a capability and/or intent to integrate Copperleaf capability on a restricted basis with suppliers at a project level?
I missed that one. I need to hear it one more time because
So
it confused me just a bit.
Is there
Sorry.
a sort of intention and/or a possibility of integrating the Copperleaf capabilities with suppliers at a kind of individual project level? So can you?
Oh, right. Okay, right. Yeah. Okay. So at the moment, Sarah, I'm unaware of you having that on your horizon of allowing. I think that, taking a step back, when we started the project, when we launched back in January, as Sarah mentioned, one of the things that we did was have some great whiteboarding sessions. And one of the first things we defined was how Affinity envisioned using the system. And this wasn't something that was part of the scope of what Sarah was or Alan were interested in. The way we wanted to use it, at least is my understanding, to get started, was first, they wanted to keep it within their planning group, their capital planning group. Eventually, maybe one day they'll want to have suppliers enter investments, but that's not on the horizon as of yet.
Great, thank you, Cicely. Gosh, there's so many questions coming in. If we are not able to get to all of your questions, we're kind of coming toward the end of time now, then I'm sure that Cicely and the Copperleaf team will follow up outside of this call. But before we go, let's try and get a few more in. Are you able to consider uncertainty in optimizing your portfolio? It's a philosophical question.
Yes. Yes, so we do consider uncertainty. So one of the things that we can do in the system is ask it to add 10%, take 10% off, so we can explore what the implications might be of uncertainty in the portfolio. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And there are even models that that we can help with that can do a bit more of that. Like, for example, project execution uncertainty and risk. There are multiple ways to manage uncertainty within the system.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. And there's a few more kind of questions coming in about the model. So could you please elaborate on how the model estimates aggregate and cumulative exposure and risk across multiple routes?
I guess that's exactly what the system is designed to do. So because it looks at the entire portfolio, and as Cicely has mentioned, we can also break it down so that we don't always have to optimise the entire portfolio. We can do all of that. So in selecting the relevant value models and value measures, it does exactly that. So I'm sorry, Cicely, I'm not sure if there's anything that you wanted to add on to that. I just feel the answer is yes, we do it. It's just more about how we do it from Cicely.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right, Sarah. And it warms my heart, my little American or Oklahoman heart, to hear you say it, Sarah, because you recognize exactly how you're going to use the system and that functionality that it's going to bring for you. So I have very little more to add, Sarah.
Thank you. Fine. So I think we'll come to our final question now, because I know that people have got busy lives. So for Sarah, 14 weeks, impressive. Is the tool integrated to the computerized maintenance management system, or is it standalone?
It's a web-based system, so it sort of stands alone. On purpose, we have decided not to fully integrate it with our existing systems, but we do have the capability to input to it. So as Cicely mentioned, for example, at the company, we use Oracle Fusion for our financial management. So there is a mechanism for us to be able to upload actuals from the Fusion system into Copperleaf, so that we can create that kind of net difference between what do we want to spend, what haven't we spent. So the links are there, but on purpose I wanted to keep them separate. There may well be a future conversation to be had about what we want to do with our systems. We have a lot of them, and I'm sure that there are better ways of managing things in the future. So that's probably a future conversation with Copperleaf to be had.
I think the one thing I would just add to that is that Copperleaf absolutely have the capability of creating that automated integration. But as Sarah said, it was just outside the scope of what we decided we wanted to include for this project.
Great, thank you so much. So it just remains for me to say thank you very much to Sarah and to Cicely, and that's been really great. And I think sharing, your generosity in sharing all your knowledge and your experience from this project has been really useful for everyone. So thank you so much. And with that, thank you to our audience, and we hope to see you again soon at a Utility Week webinar.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.